When you're growing up, your parents or other authority figures may have warned you not to talk to strangers. Well, at least I hope they did anyway. This story is an example of why you shouldn't approach or talk to someone you don't know at a young age. This is the legend of Soap Sally, an urban legend or myth from my hometown of Liverpool. Although other variations of this myth do exist throughout the world, I will primarily be speaking about the variation that originates from Liverpool in the UK. This story is about one of the strangest people in the history of Liverpool's folklore. Some called her Soap Sally, others knew her as Dirty Mary or the Dog Lady, because she often gave bones from the butchers to any dogs she came across, and the grateful animals would trail behind her in packs. Soap Sally was rarely spotted during the daytime, but once twilight fell, she would invariably make her appearance. She was mostly seen around the Lime Street, London Road and Seymour Street areas, but there were also reported sightings of her as far afield as Wavertree, Kensington and Old Swan. Sally wore a silk headscarf around her head, tied tightly under her chin. She also wore a long, grubby-looking coat, baggy tights and quaint black buckled shoes. She would carry a small basket that held soap, pegs and other items she tried to sell. Her sinister reputation was primarily due to her very distinct appearance. She was about 6 feet in height, and had a pointed chin and a prominent aquiline nose. Her thick, bushy eyebrows met in the middle, above her piercing dark eyes. She obviously never put the soap she sold to use on herself because she was filthy and reeked of body odour. However, her face was always plastered in makeup, and some thought Soap Sally was actually a man in drag. In the late 1950s, a 12-year-old girl from Bootle named Patricia Campbell decided to leave home because of her parents, who were always arguing. She delved into her mother's purse, took some money to pay for the bus fare, and travelled to Liverpool, where her best friend Susan Saunders lived, somewhere off Cambridge Street. Pat arrived at Lime Street and went in search of a friend, but was unable to find her. She asked everyone, but no one had heard of the girl. Little Pat began to panic and started to wander around aimlessly. She thought about returning home, but decided that her quarrelsome parents would be livid if she went back, and she dismissed the idea. It was getting dark, and Lime Street was not a suitable place to be for a young girl. Pat was gazing up at the statue of the naked man over Lewis's, when a clammy hand suddenly covered her eyes. "Ooh, don't look at that, young miss," said a strange voice. Pat let out a little squeal of fear. When the foul-smelling hands were removed, she looked up to see a tall, thin woman stooping over her. It was Soap Sally, but she did not introduce herself. She grabbed the girl by her hand and started walking with her towards the local hill. Pat's mind was working overtime to find an escape from the old crone's clutches. "There's a policeman," she shouted and pointed across the road. Soap Sally looked over to where she was pointing, but there was no policeman in sight. Pat used the opportunity to break free and, without looking back, ran like the wind back up to Lime Street until she had a stitch in her side. Pat Campbell thought about the woman who had tried to grab her and whose pungent body odour still filled her nostrils, and she shuddered. Then an unusual sight soon took the runaway's girl mind off the scary encounter. A dazzling advertisement on a hoarding on the corner of London Road, which showed a girl on a swing advertising full swing lemonade. The girl's image was made up of dozens of lights. As Pat stood mesmerised by this illuminated advert, Soap Sally caught up with her and struck again, and this time she grabbed the girl's arm. Pat could not break free. Sally pulled what looked like a knife out of her covered basket and said, "You'll never see your mummy and daddy again if you make a sound." And she bared her yellow teeth at Pat, who felt as if her legs were starting to buckle. She started to cry. As Sally turned up to go up Lord Nelson Street, she stopped in her tracks. Coming towards her was a teddy boy named Jimmy Fleet, a real hard knock from the Bullring tenements. Jimmy took one look at Soap Sally and how she had a hold of little Pat, and in one movement he produced a flick knife and clicked it open. Sally swore at him and pushed Pat forwards. Jimmy beckoned for the crying girl to come forward, and he positioned himself in front of her. Sally took out a carving knife from her basket and brandished it at the youth for a moment, but then thought better of it and turned and fled in a disappointed rage. As she ran across the road, she moved like a man, and curiously had prominent carved-up muscles like a man. In an uncharacteristically chivalrous gesture, Jimmy, the young tearaway, took Pat to a police station, from where she was returned to her parents in Bootle. The police made inquiries, and they visited a certain house on Seymour Street, which was said to be Soap Sally's home, but got no answer. When the two policemen peered through the front window, all they could see was a Yorkshire Terrier looking back at them from a basket. A forced entry was made, but the place was deserted. Even the terrier in the basket was a stuffed animal. So too was a budgie they found. When they interviewed people in the neighbourhood, the police had heard all sorts of stories, including claims that the soap which Sally had sold contained fat from human bodies, although this was probably just a fabrication. It is said that about a month after a terrifying encounter with Soap Sally, Pat Campbell woke up at 3:30 in the morning. Something was tapping on her bedroom window. To her horror, when she went to look out, there on the pavement was Soap Sally throwing little stones up at her. Sally pointed her grubby finger at the petrified girl, and then made a cutthroat gesture with her finger across her neck. She cackled, then ran off silently. Perhaps Pat had merely had a nightmare, but to her it seemed all too real. Some say that Soap Sally's ghost still walks the streets of Liverpool. So, this is my first video, and obviously I was stuttering a lot, and maybe my telling of events wasn't the best, but this is a learning process for me, especially with editing and things like that. So, although this may come across as really amateurish, which it is, I hope you enjoyed my telling of the story of Soap Sally, and I hope this convinces you enough to subscribe and, leave a comment or something, and like the video if you liked it. Until next time, this has been The Spooky Corner, and I will see you soon.